Been doing this. That answer is not really straightforward. My
Makes
earliest,
sense.
yeah. So my earliest forms of this kind of working with a malleable material like clay, I would say go all the way back to when my grandmother would keep me. She would make homemade Play-Doh with flour, and we'd use food coloring, and it would be warm, and it was so much fun. I loved helping her make that Play-Doh, and we would make all different colors and make farm scenes and all these things. And so, I mean, it's amazing how things like when you're that young, how those types of things really stick with you. And I know there's all these psychological things behind why that happens and everything,
Right.
but I'm not very into psychological things. So I can't give you all the scientific background. All I can say is that's where I really attribute like the start of when I first really found that medium. And then
It's a beautiful
I,
place.
yeah, it's so special. And then I have just always looked for a creative outlet. So I got really into Irish step dancing. And so I kind of got away from the Play-Doh. I grew up, so to speak, and found a creative
Ooh,
outlet.
back up. Did you just say Irish step dancing?
Yes, I was a competitive Irish step dancer, no less.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't even know there was competitions for that type of tap dancing.
Well, if you ever end up in a situation where you can watch a competition, it's brutal. The girls take it very seriously, and guys too. Everyone loves it. But yeah, competitions. You can do it as a group or you can do it individually,
Oh my god.
and it's crazy. The costumes and the big curly wigs and everything. Yeah, I had so much
Only
fun.
Irish people. I mean,
It was so much fun, so much fun. But in that way, I got away from ceramics for a bit because I was so into dancing and practicing, and that's where my friend group was.
right.
And then everything changed kind of back to ceramics actually the summer after eighth grade. So the summer before my freshman year of high school, I had been diagnosed with scoliosis in fifth grade. And so I had worn like the back bracing and everything, and that wasn't really working. And so I ended up having scoliosis spinal fusion surgery in eighth grade. And the recovery process is pretty much don't do anything for a year. So
Oh,
don't
smart.
dance. Yeah, well, you're trying to heal, of course,
I
heal
know,
everything.
right.
So I've got like bones and,
Yeah, but that's hard on you because I can imagine. I mean, you seem like you're a creative person. You seem like somebody that is your drive and that gives you your energy and keeps you going and is what you're stemming forward to. And not being able to do that is just like, what?
right.
What do I do
Yes.
now?
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah. So the recovery was a year long of pretty much like don't jump, don't bend, don't twist. So pretty much don't dance. And like you said, that was really hard for me. And so my mom signed me up for a pottery class, just a, generic student kids pottery class over the summer. And I really fell in love with it again. And in actual clay in this form, not homemade Play-Doh. But I just love the process. And the clay was so malleable. And I had to stay so rigid and everything. So I think I was just really drawn to such that hands-on experience. And as they say, the rest is history. I just kept taking more and more classes, and my school didn't really offer it, so I was taking it through a cultural center in my area, and
Nice.
it's a great outlet. But there weren't really
Do
classes
you have local
specifically.
don't those culture centers usually have local volunteers that come in to help or not necessarily?
It depends on what's going on. There were volunteers, but this actually there were teachers as well who were getting paid. So it was like the real deal. I had some really great instructors there, and they had kilns and everything. So we had like the full experience. but they didn't really have classes specifically geared toward high schoolers. So
I see.
I was in there with people, 30, 50 plus years older than me, like
Oh,
mostly
wow.
retirees, but they really just took me under their wing. They're, like drinking and throwing, and I'm like 15 years old, just, just hanging out. But it was so much fun, those evenings. And then I ended up getting a degree for it. I liked it so much that I went to Anderson University and got a degree. University in South Carolina, I should say. I know there are two, but it's the South Carolina School of the Arts. And so it's a small program, but it's so good. I think there were three of us in the graduating class, but it was really a great program, really amazing.
Sorry.
You're good.
Well, it's one of those things where, as artist, when you first start out, like kind of the first sprout of creativity, because as kids we're like sponges, and I can relate so well to you. I mean, as a kid, I grew up. My father was an immigrant from Morocco,
Mm,
and he loved cooking. He was very creative. My dad loved architecture and building things, so I always had that growing up. And for me, getting back to culinary, like right now, I work in a kitchen, and being able to be creative into something that, oh, I kind of liked when I was younger. I can actually turn this into something that I can make money off of, but enjoyable. I have an enjoyable work environment that's
sure.
also beneficial for me. That's very rare these days. You understand this?
Right. Yeah.
Most people end up in jobs that they fucking hate. It's terrible. But having those opportunities of doing something you want to do, even though like you're around like older and younger people, I can understand where that could be eye opening in a way. You're like, huh, all these different
Yeah.
people learning the same thing I'm doing, but doing it in a different way. Just every single time you're coming into class, just seeing that over and over again.
Right. And they, like I said, they were retirees, but they had been doing pottery for a while. And so I had several different instructors there, and just seeing like their styles and where they were coming from. And for the most part, they had taught in like a college type setting, and they wanted a more relaxed pace. And so seeing like their backgrounds, they really helped me develop my style to get into college actually. And of course that my styles changed over time as well, but really that's the beauty, like you said, of a community studio or a community space. And I'm in a community studio now, but just bouncing ideas off of each other, and recognizing everyone has their own styles. And it's amazing, like everything starts from this mud, this clay, and then seeing all of these different ideas and styles and aesthetics really coming out of each other's like spaces and everything. It's just so
And
encouraging.
projects, when
Yeah.
you're, when one of the coolest things, and this is what I always loved about ceramic, is when you take someone that's from a certain region or how they learned how to do pottery, and you watch them make plates, just a simple plate. You'll get these artists that will make these deep dish plates or very flat plates. And when they first starting out, and they're, I don't know the terminology for all of this.
Go
You'll
for it.
correct me.
Sure.
But when they put the clay and they start shaping it onto that wheel, you can see their hands are moving in different directions. And it's as if they've trained their mind and body, their fingers, to manipulate this piece of clay to their own, I guess, specification.
Sure.
Is that is
That's
that is that a terminology?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and that takes years of training, of course. The the wheel was never my first love in ceramics. I do a lot of slip casting, and so if you're not familiar with that term, because I wasn't until I went to college, basically if you've seen like Wedgwood pottery or McCoy pottery, kind of that very teacup type, if you think of just like a fancy teacup, that style is usually made by making one shape that you love and then casting a mold of that shape. And so slip is like liquid clay, that's the term, and then slip cast is your
I- I'm
casting
I'm
out of.
I'm dyslexic, so I'm trying to process this in my brain.
Sure, it's a very 3D negative space, positive space kind of thing, and it is a lot to wrap your head around.
But I can see what you mean with the frame. It's weird because it's a very delicate piece. You know, it's one of those items you're spending a lot of money because it's a very delicate process from start to finish. Is that
Exactly.
correct? Okay.
Exactly, yes, and you can usually get thinner pieces than you can on the wheel typically because you're pouring and you control how much that plaster, that mold is absorbing the water out, and so you're creating kind of that ring or that film. And so you can get really thin pieces, and that's where the porcelain comes in because porcelain clay is translucent. And I'm probably boring you at this point with all of my technical
No,
ceramics.
I'm just stoned and enjoying this right now. I love
Okay.
this.
Okay. Yeah. So porcelain is known for its translucent properties. And so that's kind of the idea of using a mold. You can get the porcelain as thin as you can, so it's translucent to see through. Also, bone china is that way as well. So you're using bone ash. I don't work with bone ash, but that's another
Is it
translucent form of pottery.
okay? This is something actually I want to hear from you as a ceramic artist because I'm very curious.
Sure.
What is the biggest difference between bone china and my typical understanding of like pottery clay, like Greek Mediterranean style? What is the main difference in the materials? I understand they're made
Sure.
out of different compounds and ingredients, but like fragile state, structure.
Yeah. So there's so many things in the pottery world where people have differing opinions. So this is my take on it. So if anyone out there is actually a professor, I back up. I give all the smart intelligence. Go for it. Comment. I'd love to hear other sides of this. But my interpretation of it is so there's I'll just give you the whole rundown. There's
Sure.
wild clay that's dug right out of the ground. So if you dig
Okay.
wild clay, that's like the red clay. I'm in the Carolinas. So the red dirt you see everywhere, that is actually clay that you can process. And that is typically terracotta type, if you're familiar with terracotta, like
Yeah.
pots.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
it's a lower firing clay. It's usually full of iron that's giving it that red color.
Hmm.
It's got some grit to it. That's called grog in the pottery world, but that grit
Okay.
binds the clay together. So it's usually more structurally able to be bound together. And then from there, you kind of work your way up. So you've
We
got
used to call it in
stoneware.
the kitchen because we used to call it rust.
Oh, yeah, that's a great word for it. It doesn't come out of clothes, I can tell you that.
Well, the thing about it is because you know they use the ones that had the laminate, and then of course the bottom of it was there was no covering or anything, so it's just
Sure.
the enamel. And the reason why we use salads, and I never understood this, and my chef explained it to me. It's like when you're making a cold salad, this is the perfect plate to put it on. And he says because it keeps an even temperature throughout the
Mm,
entire plate. And I was like, oh my God, I never thought about it. And then you realize that, like, these, like you're explaining, like these clays, they have a purpose and like why they have these different ingredients in them.
right, yeah.
Oh my God, this is so fascinating.
It's yeah, I can
So,
get
what are the
so
other?
technical.
So, what are the other ones? I'm curious.
Sure, so you've probably heard of stoneware. So
Okay.
that's like a higher firing clay body, for the most part. So stoneware usually has a bit more of that grog to it, and it can be in different colors, and it also can be dug, but usually this is going to be like the higher firing pots. So if you're familiar with like wood firing, where you see the big outdoor kilns that people can walk into, and you put all the pots in there and you brick it up and fire it for days, that's usually like a
Mm-hmm.
stoneware clay. So it's really durable. It's got a lot of grog. It's kind of a more earthy type feel to it. Usually the
And it
glazes
can
are a lot
handle
of
heat.
browns. It can handle heat really well, yeah. So it's great for
Okay.
bakeware if you make like lasagna dishes, things like that that go straight into the oven. It can take that thermal shock because it's got that grog to bind it together. Whereas like a porcelain, does not take thermal shock well because it transmits heat so easily. So porcelain doesn't have any grog in it. It's just a smooth clay. And that's why it's so prone to cracking during the making process, because there's nothing binding it. That
Oh,
grog has
so it's
been
like
removed.
there's like none of the minerals or the compounds that's in there. It's kind of like, oh my god, this is, oh god, stoner brain. I'm thinking of Wonder Bread. That's what it's
Sure.
reminding of. Yeah, because like Wonder Bread has like nothing. There's just
Right.
nothing. It's
Yeah.
just bread.
That is a great example. You're right. It's removed all of the big, chunky, groggy qualities out, and so you're left with that refined, smooth
Texture.
clay. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's got some different ingredients. It's very much like making bread. You're mixing different dry materials and then you add water to get the clays. And so porcelain, it is a higher temperature as well. It can be. Usually it's fired to some of the highest temperatures along with stoneware, but it just doesn't handle that thermal shock well. So if you take something right out of the refrigerator and put it into the oven, if it's porcelain, it'll probably crack on you.
So it's like you have to do like a gradual heat.
Exactly. So you
I
warm it
see.
up as
Okay.
the oven preheats. But porcelain is used everywhere. It's used in a lot of like surgical, like body replacements, like bone type things. It's used on the spaceships. You can find it. I mean,
Oh,
obviously,
wow.
toilets, sinks. It's kind of everywhere. So you've probably touched clay multiple times today and had no idea. It's just all prevalent throughout our lives.
Well, I think one of the most fascinating things when we think about clay, you think of the Mesopotamian areas, going back thousands of years, using clay tablets,
Yeah.
creating structures out of these molds, cement and bricks. It's just, it's dirt.
Yeah. Yep. I
It's
mean,
crazy.
cuneiform, isn't that one of the earliest written languages? And it was pressed into clay with a
Yeah.
stick. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
amazing.
in all cultures. It's amazing.
So what type of pottery or what type of things do you make primarily?
That's a great question.
It is a great
uh,
question.
it depends. Mainly, I make functional pieces because that's kind of my aesthetic and that's also what sells, honestly. And so I am drawn to like Victorian aesthetics and a lot of, like I mentioned before, Wedgwood, so blue and white kind of pottery, a lot of florals. And so I work primarily in porcelain and I do some of everything. I do slip casting, wheel throwing, and hand building. And it's all microwave and dishwasher safe, but it's all that white clay, teapots, mugs, saucers, bowls, sugar bowls, heart dishes. I do a lot of different like functional pieces, and then every once in a while I'll do like a sculptural series just for fun.
It's kind of strange because we tend to forget that in this day and age, most of the things that we buy and consume is, you have something for 4 years, toss it and get something else. Okay. Years ago, people would buy a pottery set and then they'd pass it on to their children. And
Hmm.
then their children would pass it on to their children because it was so expensive. It's like
Right.
just a part of the family. So, in a way, do you feel that when you're creating these pieces? Because
Mm.
again, the period that you're touching on, the history behind tea and pottery
Hmm.
and teapots and all that comes into it. I mean, because again, it is a part of family heritage in a way for some
Yeah,
families alone.
you're right. Yeah, it's very much an heirloom type commodity, I guess is a way to
Heirloom.
put it.
Yes.
And a lot of pottery is bought for the sole purpose of being given to someone else. So a lot of my customers are buying them as gifts. I do have some collectors, um, but that is something to consider. And I have gotten feedback that, oh, this reminds me of my grandmother's china, but a little bit more contemporary. And so I love that compliment. I think that's just amazing. But yeah, it's a lot of pressure, and I think that's something you've tapped into. There's a lot of responsibility as a potter that I think people who are picking it up as a hobby probably don't pick up on, because it took me years to realize you're making a piece that somebody's going to use, and they're going to most likely eat off of this piece. And so there is a responsibility, I believe, for the artist to make these pieces food safe and durable. And that is something that I don't think is it's not brought up enough. So you can buy commercial glazes, you can buy commercial clays, or you can make your own glaze, you can make your own clay. Everything, can be as customized as you want, but you've really got to match the glaze element to the clay body, because if those two don't match, the
They
piece
won't
might not be
seal.
food safe. Exactly. So you might get crazing or cracking, which is really
Yes.
beautiful. And there's so many opinions again on, can you use pieces that are crazed? Is that food safe or not? But all of this, even there were lead glazes that were made in the 60s. I just think that there's such a responsibility to make
Uh,
that piece food safe.
no, agreed. And I can say, as a person that works in the food industry, when you're working with these types of pottery, they have to be glazed because primarily with the high pressure like dishwashers and cleaning and being on different tables, they can't be dainty. It's just
Right.
it's not the right place to have it. And you're right. It's one of those simple things where we don't touch a base on, where it has a crucial part of our lives consistently. That how how do you make this? How do we? It's not just like you said, like just a simple hobby. Like, it shouldn't be treated like, oh, it's just a job.
Right.
I mean, hello, we've been doing this for thousands of years.
Right.
Like, if it was useless, why are we still doing it?
Sure. Yeah. And some things don't have to be food safe, of course, if you're making sculptures,
Oh,
or
for
you don't have to
sure.
eat off of them.
You're right.
Yeah, if you're making a mug, then yeah, of course you need to do the proper tests to make sure, is this sealed? Is this, if it's getting hot in the microwave, then that means the clay is absorbing water. So the glaze isn't as watertight as it needs to be. And there's tests you can do and things you can do. And I've actually reformulated my glaze. I was buying a commercial glaze, and then something happened between the glaze recipe or the clay recipe. Something
Oh,
happened and things were no longer compatible. So a couple of years ago, I had to do a lot of testing, but I think it's so worth it, because if you want those returning customers and you want to produce work that is, you want a good name. So of course I'm going to do what it takes to make a reputable piece for my customers. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and I think that's where you're talking about people. If it's a hobby, you might not be willing to put in the work or the research to make that. And if you're not selling it and you're just using it, then that's, the responsibility is just on you. But if you're selling these pieces to people who are going to drink out of the mug that might not be food safe, then, you know I don't know what else I could say about that.
yeah. It's just it's just kind of interesting because when you look at something that looks simple, I mean, because let's be honest, sometimes you could just look at a painting or a tea set or a plate, and it's like, okay, I mean, it's simple, but the work that goes in for that pattern, that glaze, that shape, that mold, there's so much you can learn from that once you step into that as a role, and it's just one of those things you just don't think about very often, because why would you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a fascinating world, and the deeper I get into the pottery world, the more things I realize I don't know. You know how that goes. Um,
Yeah.
so there's always something to learn, but I love it. I love researching things and learning, trying new things. So it's all fun for me. But yeah, the glaze reformulating, I will say that was a little bit scary
That is
until
that is
until I got
kind
it
of
figured out.
bananas. How, like, you had to like literally create your own formula to, wow.
So I thankfully there's a great resource called Glazy. It's a free website, and so you can kind of go in and see like what worked for other people, what clay are they using, what temperatures are they firing to, and so I spent a lot of time on there, kind of going off of trying different recipes and altering what already existed to kind of create mine, because I use a clear, so it's nothing fancy that I'm doing. I just need a clear glaze to cover up my surface designs, because that's where I really like to spend the most time.
Do, Do you hand paint them?
Well, I hand drew them and then I got them copyrighted. And oh my goodness, if you've never gotten anything copyrighted, that is quite a wild road. But I got them copyrighted and then I screen print them onto my pieces. So that way they're the
Wow.
same shape and they're uniform, everything lines up. But yeah,
You did the original prints though.
I did. Yep. That's why I got them copyrighted because I'm using the same design. So you can get like a set, like you were saying, like a set of dinnerware. I want everything to be the same. So I have 4 different wildflower designs that I hand drew and then I got them copyrighted. So yeah, everything matches.
It's kind of funny because there are artists that are okay with making 12 pieces and they don't have to be all identical. And I'm kind of one of the ones that I'm like, it's okay for it to be a little identical. I mean, because there's a symmetry that goes with it. You worked on this really cool design, really getting like, for example, like petals and the flowers and the colors and the right hue, and then like be able to create this beautiful set.
Mm.
It's got to be, there's got to be symmetry with everything.
Yeah, there's some satisfying. I think that probably comes from like my whole scoliosis experience, like there wasn't symmetry in my body, so to speak. So like
Oh,
I
okay.
think I must crave it. But then, of course, I deviate. So I have these designs that I've screen printed, right? And so I cut them out of the paper that I've screen printed them on, and then I can apply them however I want. And so usually I apply them so they don't come out perfectly cleanly. So you've got that kind of antiquated, like wallpaper kind of falling off kind of look. So they'll be the design, but each one's a little bit different. And the way the glaze happens too. It might be a little bit more watercolor feeling or a little bit more crisp, or the design might not have come out as perfectly cleanly here as it did over there. So I love having that design, but then I call it finding the individual within the identical. So
Oh,
all the cups look the
okay.
same, but they're all a little bit individual in a way.
They have a little bit of character.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, hey, if you want a signature, I mean, because the thing is, each artist has their own unique signature. I don't mean a hand signature,
Sure.
like our own like mark that we leave. But that probably is a really good feeling, being able to work on something that you created, being able to give that out. I mean, I can imagine going through that copyright, like I haven't gone through any of that. I should, but
Yeah, go
I
for it.
I don't even know. I don't even know where you start with these kind of things. It's just there's a lot of stuff on the internet and most of it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, that's fair. Yeah, you got to watch out what you're reading. But yeah, copywriting is a whole, I mean, you're getting the government involved, so it's a whole different ballgame. You've got to know exactly what your pieces are titled and exactly you've got to submit them in appropriate ways. And then you've got to wait for months. And then if something goes wrong, they'll email you. They're great about telling you what you did wrong and how to fix it. And so then that goes back and that might sit for a couple of months and then you get something back and, oh, this needs to change and back and forth, back and forth. But then when you finally get that letter that says, yep, these are yours and they are actually legally your designs, that's amazing. That's a feeling that I have that piece of paper framed, honestly, because it felt so good. Such a badge of honor to have these
Well,
designs in my name.
it's an important thing that you brought up because we live now in a time where as artists we're finally getting our voice back. We're
Yeah,
we're tired of being abused, mistreated, our work's being stolen from us. I mean, can you imagine how many designers their work has been stolen? Like people that make pottery and stuff. Like, to what end does this
right.
have to continue? It's like, why can't we live in a collaboration community where all of us do our own unique things? Like, is that not possible? Because I don't want to believe that.
That's a great question. And again, I'm not up to date on all of the rules, but I did read a book and it said artists, visual artists, I can't speak to like songs. I'm not familiar with any other form than visual, honestly. But visual artists, if you create something, that design is yours legally. even if you don't get it copyrighted. Like even if I didn't get my drawings copyrighted, they are mine. So if someone put my designs on a T-shirt and I took them to court and they were selling that T-shirt, I could sue them. But here's the thing: if I had these designs, they were not copyrighted, they were just legally mine because I created them. Someone else got them copyrighted and put them on a shirt. They're no longer mine because I had no proof that they were ever mine in the first place. So I got my designs copyrighted even though they were legally mine to begin with, but so no one else would copyright them
See,
first.
I do not like getting political, but this is where my libertarianism kind of kicks in, and I'm like, yeah, no, no.
It's weird what is fair in this world sometimes.
Well, I try to believe that one of the things that has kept us alive as human beings is not only just the fact that we're here, is the fact of creativity. We
Mm,
found a way to collaborate with each other and be able to celebrate that in a way. And it's kind of strange when you're feeling that like it's kind of coming apart. But you mentioned before when you were in when you were in school and you were learning and you had all of these different people, those experiences open you up to possibilities you'd have never expected.
yeah. Yeah. And even going to school for pottery. I mean, just hearing that there were people who used to be ceramics professors, like, what? That's a thing? I can do that? I could really go to school for that? It's amazing to hear about different people. Even like, I remember one of my instructors used to work for Kohler. He was like the main glaze technician at Kohler
Oh
for
wow.
like toilets and sinks and things. And it's amazing to think like, a lot of people think, oh, arts, that's the therapy. That's what you spend your hobby time on. And they don't really think about all the math, the chemistry, the thought process, the computer work, development, research and development, all this stuff that goes into making art. And honestly, I didn't either until I got into it.
Well, believe it or not, and I've said this many times, architects are artists,
Right. Yeah.
programmers are artists, mathematicians are artists. I mean, it's a different form of art, but it's
Sure.
still art.
Yeah, I don't think everything can be as separated into black and white as we think it
No,
can be. So,
because they all stem from creativity and ideas. That is what art is, right?
right,
So if you're able to harness that and make something of it, and again, it's not just about having a hobby. You can make something of it. You can make a profession for yourself. That is a realistic thing you can do.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think not enough people hear that, honestly. But that's why this podcast exists, right?
Right. And it's people like yourself, you know, when you have artists that you have those again, having those experiences that open yourself up to where you are now. You know, again, when you honestly, I can't imagine the hardship that you went through, you know, going through issues like I suffer from lower back pain. My whole
Mm.
family does. It's a genetic thing. It's our lower like the lower lumbar on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And having those stresses in your life, specifically in your case, where you're going through braces, you know, you can imagine being in school and just feeling different
Yeah,
and not being able to have that connection and kind of being able to be back to something that you can connect to. It can help you stand up because we have always low and high points in our lives.
right.
And
Yeah.
and understanding that our lows doesn't mean it's going to be low forever. It's just
Right.
right now.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And honestly, I didn't feel comfortable talking about my scoliosis experience for about 10 years.
Are you
I just,
serious?
yeah, I just didn't. And I think a lot of that could have been changed if I had like, if back in the day, back in the day, I'm very young, but back in the day, you
Back
know,
in the day.
well, just, I feel like just since the pandemic, like mental health has just gotten such a great spotlight. And so it's more acceptable to go to therapy, more acceptable to talk about things. And so if that had been the case when I had my surgery, that might have been different. But, it wasn't. And so for 10 years I did not feel comfortable, and I could hide it pretty well, like all I have is great posture. People wouldn't know otherwise unless they ask me to like bend over and pick something up and my back is just straight. So I hid it pretty well. My close friends and family obviously knew, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about it for about 10 years. And then after that point, I the Lord told me to write a book. So that's kind of what happened. And not only have I felt comfortable talking about it, but I've now written a book that's going to be published in January.
What's the name of the book?
It's called God the Artist, and it's a collection of Bible verses that reference pottery. And I'm a Christian, so it's from a Christian ceramic standpoint. So I'm kind of talking about these verses, how we unpacked clay actually earlier. I'm doing the same thing in the book. So all these verses that are potentially looked over or maybe not interpreted to the fullest. I'm saying, okay, this is what this actually means from a pottery standpoint, and I'm kind of coming in. And of course, my scoliosis story gets involved because the only way I found pottery was because of my scoliosis. And so, like you're
Right.
talking about highs and lows, who knows? I might still be Irish step dancing if I had never had back surgery. I mean, that's a weird sentence, but it's true, Like
Hey,
it's
I
weird.
mean, curveballs. That's what life
Yeah.
throws at you. Um, but touching on that, I mean, I myself, I'm Jewish.
Mm,
I'm no longer religious. I was raised Orthodox,
okay.
and it is that is something that's really fascinating. Is because even though we have a lot of history, one of the interesting things, especially like in the Old Testament or the Torah, there is the mention of pottery. Like even in the story of with Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
the clay idols. I mean, we're talking about what, like 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago,
Yeah.
a really long time ago, and it's just why, think about it. Like you're a group, a tribe, and you have this belief or following. You're using these materials, for idol worship, whatever in that case. Why are you using those materials?
Yeah. I mean,
Like
that's a great question. And clay is one of the few things you mentioned tea culture, that's pretty worldwide. But clay is one of the few things that's worldwide. And that's just it's mind-blowing. But I mean,
the
everywhere
Native Amer-
has dirt, so it makes
Native
sense in a
Americans.
way. But yeah, you've got to figure out that, oh, if I, burn this dirt at 2000 degrees, it actually changes a chemical process and becomes a dish, and it's amazing. I think that really speaks to, like you're talking about, humanity and creativity, that different cultures who never talk to each other were able to use the same medium to get the same results. But they look completely different. Like you mentioned, Native American pottery and Japanese pottery, completely different. It's amazing.
Total. Yeah, I Japanese pottery is another level. I mean, I once had watched a documentary of Japanese pottery, and just it's I don't even know how to describe it.
There's
It's
such a
Oh
reverence.
my god. It's like
Yeah.
there's a prayer, and there's like a service that goes into it, and there's just, in a way, pottery there is a religion. I mean
Mm,
that, it's in itself has become a religious culture.
mm.
It's Oh my god, it's crazy. It's cute, it's beautiful. It really
Yeah.
is.
Japanese tea ceremony. I did a project on that actually in school.
Really?
Yeah. Man, my art history professor, she was amazing. We all had to perform the Japanese tea ceremony as accurately as possible, making our own supplies, and it was
Wow.
such a great project. But you're right, there is so much reverence for the materials, reverence for your surroundings. The colors you wear should represent the environment, the seasons that you're in, the colors you would see in nature, all about being reverent to your guests, serving your guests, and in the same way, respecting your host. And it it is such, they are not fast, and I really appreciate that they are willing to take hours on one piece that I just have such impatience for. And I think it's the American culture I was raised in, but it is amazing the work that they can do. It's beautiful.
And it, like you said before, to see the different cultures taking the same elements and creating different things out of them. It's again that we as beings, we make things.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We make things. And the things that we have made going throughout history, it just goes to show the level of thinking and creativity that's like, oh wow, they thought of that back then. They did that. They created those kind of heirlooms. There are heirlooms that we have now that we don't even think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's crazy to think like what I'll pass down to my children or what I
Hmm.
won't. Or yeah, I mean, I'm single, so that's going to be a while. But just thinking about, we don't have the same type heirlooms, I don't think, that we did. And thrifting's so popular nowadays, who knows what'll happen. But everything is so fast in this consumer culture. I was talking to about that topic to a friend the other day. Just consumer culture is crazy. I mean, even in the ceramics world, even with pottery, like buy something new, even if it's not worn out. And I think we've just lost something there when there are pieces that have been passed down, like you said, for generations. And that's not really the case anymore. It's make what's in style, and once it's out of style, make something else. So
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I have I have a pot in my kitchen, and it's from Morocco.
mm,
My grandmother, she passed away many 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 years ago. She got the pot and gave it to my mom,
hmm.
and this was like 1978.
Oh, wow.
So this pot is like 40 plus years old, and it's something that I have.
Yeah.
And it it's not the only thing that I have that's like that. And we don't realize is there are things that we pass down. It's not just pots, watches, cars, couches, TVs. I know it's going to
Yeah.
sound strange. Like people are like TVs. Well, believe it or not, people are actually buying CRT TVs. Like that is a thing now.
Wow.
Yeah. Because of video games, there's like a nostalgia now.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are things that you would never think would be turned into, but now is that's the thing.
Yeah, cameras. My dad was a
Yes.
photographer for a while, so
Yes.
I've got several of his old cameras and things. Yeah, it's
What
pretty
if
crazy.
have you what are the things that have like explored as yourself? I mean, I know you've touched on pottery. I know you're writing a book. What for yourself? What kind of creative mindset would you say you are right now compared to you were like 10 years ago, like you gave
Oh,
before?
yeah. That's a great question. Man, I have not gotten that question yet, and I love that question. I would say, man, that's so good. Well, 10 years ago, yeah, that's pretty much when I started pottery, and I was just trying everything. And so now I would say I've settled into a style that I like. I've settled into a clay that I like. I pretty much don't work outside of Kentucky Mudworks porcelain. I just love their clay. And so I've really, in a way, I have kind of honed in my experimenting instead of being all over the place, trying different glazes, trying different clays, trying everything. I found what I liked and I'm sticking with it, and I'm more intentional about my experiments. And so I'm still playing around, I still try different things, but with intentionality. I kind of know this is my set style. I've given myself that parameter, but within that parameter, the possibilities are still endless. I can still do whatever I want. And if I ever want to change my style, I can. But I love I love following the rules. So I love having a boundary that I know where it is, and I love just playing as exploratory as I can within that boundary. I think that's so freeing. So like, to answer your question, I guess like I said, I have a lot of functional pieces. Every once in a while, I'll do sculptural things, but it's more exploring different shapes. So I made this teacup shape. I used it for a while. Okay, great. I want to make a new teacup shape. Well, I'm still going to make a teacup. It's still going to be white. It's still going to be slip cast. It's still going to have the flowers on it, but I want to change the shape completely. And so I'll use that one for a while, and then I'll change something else or different things like that. So I think I have come so far in the 10 years that I've been doing this. It's looking back, it's just crazy to see where I started. I've come so far and I've learned so much that I can now be more intentional about my creative process.
I think that's I think it's a very valuable lesson because we always like to stem for perfection. And
Mm,
the beauty, like you were saying, your path and your experience has been taking chaos, and tons of everything and formulating it and creating your own flow in your way,
mm,
I guess, your own flow state.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. And all artists kind of have like a body of work. Even if you look at Picasso, and he went through like a blue period and a red period,
Yes.
different styles. And so, yeah, I feel like I found my style for now, but I also don't like to be bored. And so, who knows what'll happen? I might find a different style that I like, but for right now, I'm really liking the blue and white. So, we'll see.
The thing that we tend to forget is respect the artist.
Mm.
Because, listen, you complain about a lot of terrible movies recently. I think there's a reason why. But there is a truth in that, allowing free creativity and open mindedness allows actual creation and collaboration.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, if you were restricted with the type of design and sizes you're able to do, I don't think you would be as happy.
right. That's a great way to put it. And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned slip casting. I make my own molds. And there are commercial molds out there, but like I said, I know the parameter. I want to slip cast, but I want the freedom. I want to make my own molds. And so it's all about that balance of where are you willing to give and take, and where are you willing to, outsource some things. Some people use molds, and that's their prerogative, but I'm not willing to compromise my design. I want my design. I just want it in plaster. So it's all about however you want your artistic abilities to stretch, and how much do you want to do yourself. And for me, I want to do a lot of it myself because I just like to learn, and I just want to have, like you said, that perfectionist, that kind of control over my work.
Right. And it's sorry, I had a frog in my throat.
You're good.
It's just it's kind of a realization that, you know, we always say, you got to work harder. Got to always work
Mm,
harder. I My philosophy is this: instead of working harder, why don't you look at the things you want to do? Focus on the
yeah.
things that you want to do and the things that you need. And understand things you need and the things you want to do. And if you can balance those two out, okay, you want to call it, quote, working harder? Sure. Go right ahead. But it's a balance,
Yeah.
it's figuring out how to level it out correctly. And in your case, it could be 10 years, some people could be 5 years, sometimes it could be 20 years. I don't think there really is a number of how long this process really takes.
Right. And ceramics is so cyclical. It's almost like the seasons in a way of the cycle and kind of flow of pottery. So it feels like I'm always doing something different, even though I'm always in the studio. But, on one hand, I'm making things, and I have to make enough things to fill the kiln. So I'm constantly making. I'll have weeks of, as you say, working hard making. And then I'll fire the kiln. And then I get those pieces back, and now I'm glazing those pieces. So I'm not making anymore. I'm doing something completely different. I'm painting on the glaze. I'm doing my surface design. I'm screen printing. I'm laying out patterns. So it feels completely different because now I'm almost more working in two dimensions. I'm almost like a painter working on a surface, so to speak. And then after that, I fire them again. And then after that, now I've got to price them and pack them up or sell them or ship them to where they need to be sold or deliver them. So it is constantly a cycle, and it is constantly, like you say, working hard, but it's working hard in different areas. So there's less burnout, in my opinion, because I'm constantly switching gears, which I love so much. If I was just doing the same monotonous every day, I would drive myself crazy. I'd switch.
Well, I work a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday,
Oh, same.
and I got
Yay.
yeah, I literally got to a point a few months ago, like at the end of August. I'm like, I started working there last year. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going
Mm.
out of my mind. So I looked for a second job,
Mm.
and I found a gastro bar that was recently starting up called Black Flamingo. They're in Florida,
Oh,
in
cool.
Oakland Park, which is in Fort Lauderdale. Anyway, they they needed somebody working there in the kitchen. I went there, and my experience with food. I'm also I draw. I also play guitar, and I do this. I
Wow.
dabble in a lot of things. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, being in that environment, let alone, even though, like you said, working harder, less burnouts. I get to go there. Yes, I'm doing kind of the same things, but going through that process of making the dough and then letting it rise and then baking it and then taking it out and then portioning it out and then actually making it into it's the same process, but I get to experience different experience throughout it. And it's just, again, that I feel like for me as an artist, that is what I live and breathe for. If I don't have
Mm.
that, I don't have my oxygen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There's something reassuring about that process, to know that's the process that will always exist, and these are the steps that must be in this order. There's something soothing about that. I don't know.
Yeah, there is. I mean, how do you describe this? Because look, I feel like most people are creative and artistic to a certain degree, but
Mm.
generally explaining it to just, you know, people in general, it's very hard. I have a very
Yeah.
hard time like describing my love of mixing certain ingredients. It's like, what is wrong with you? But like, it's so cool. You probably feel the same. Come on, I mean,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just assuming, but like, you probably feel the same way about it. Like, oh my god, when this comes in here, it's like, whoa. But those are those are like the little sparks, that just like gets us going.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
You're
Oof.
good.
Tell me a little bit more. Like we mentioned earlier about your book that's coming out in January. You mentioned that it has to do with the history of pottery and your experience with Bible verses and
Mhm.
intertwining those. What was what was like the inspiration? Did you just wake up one day and you're like, hey, I'm gonna write a book now?
Yes and no. So, when I was at Anderson University,
Okay.
they yeah, it was a great program, and so I really started there. It is, a Christian school, and so I the professors were great about kind of helping me start to pick up on that relationship, and there are verses in the Bible about God being the potter and us as humans being the clay, and him manipulating our lives, in such a way that he sees what's going on when we don't. And so that idea got me thinking there's got to be some kind of book I could read about this. And there wasn't. There wasn't a book that I could find that was what I was actually looking for. And so at that time, the Holy Spirit, as you would say, the inspiration would be from the Holy Spirit, in my opinion. And it told me to start working on the book. And so that was 2019. And I reached out trying to find publishers at the time, and there was one publisher who said you could self-publish, and you'd have to pay a lot of money and you'd need a ghostwriter and this is terrible. So we'd need to scrap this part and you need to elaborate on this part. And I said, I don't have that kind of money. And I really want this to be my book. I don't want anyone else to write my story. And so I prayed a lot about it. And at that time, I felt the Holy Spirit saying, you know what? Like, you don't have the experience. And so I thought that meant 30, 40 years from now, decades from now, when I'm retired, I'll have all the experience I need to write the book. The pandemic hit. And at that time, I was working at a ceramic supply store and I was actually teaching some private lessons with ceramics. And so I'd gained some experience there. And with the pandemic, I realized I needed to step away from retail, take some time to work on my art, and so I moved states to work for a potter. Didn't know anyone but the potter in in the state I'm in. I'm in North Carolina now, but it was such a great experience, and there's so much pottery history in the area, and so I gained so much experience working from her. And then January of this past year, I really felt the Holy Spirit saying, like, you need to revisit that. And so I pretty much rewrote the book in 2 weeks, started reaching out to publishers. Only one got back to me. It's Morgan James Publishing in New York. And Terry Wallen, he was kind of my contact there. He said, this is a great idea, but it needs to be at least a third longer. And so I spent about a week and a half pretty much doubling the book and gave it back to him. And he said, okay, I can't make any promises, but I'll submit it for review and we'll see if you get accepted. And I did in April. And since then it has been a roller coaster and I've enjoyed every minute of it. But it's been a great experience.
It's a it's almost like a journey. What I can touch on is I do believe that the inspiration that we get as artists for designs, writing, thoughts is a life form
Hmm.
in some way. We I was thinking about this before. Maybe we are in the kiln. Maybe the universe is the kiln. You know,
Hmm.
one thing that is taught, like in Kabbalist teaching, is that we are in God.
Hmm.
God is us. We're all one thing. Kind of the dirt becoming into the clay. It's one piece. Everything is completely connected instead of it being completely the opposite. And realizing that, yeah, we do have free choice. And yes, we do have a physical world, but there's still that non physical world.
Sure. From my Christian standpoint, I can agree and disagree. So I would say you're right in the way that I believe that God created all of us and he has a creative nature and he created humanity, male and female, in his image. And so in that way,
Amen.
yes, there is creativity inside of us all because we are in the image of our creator. And so, of course, we have to create because it's part of our nature. And I think that's just the beautiful part of it. Like, you can't help but create. And in any form, like you're talking about math, singing, there, you can't help but create. It's just part of our nature. And I think that's what connects us all, like you were saying. I think that's so beautiful that we can find connections through different types of creativity too.
Right.
Because of course I have friends that are potters, how could I not? But I
Right.
also have friends that do all different kinds of beautiful work, and that's the beauty of it, bouncing ideas off of my painter friends or my theater friends, like just getting ideas and listening to different songs or different art forms, in that way getting inspiration across the
We
mediums.
all have something to offer the table.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. We really do. I mean, that creative process of creating this book, 300 pages?
It's just shy. I think it comes up around 200, but yeah.
Ooh, okay. What kind of format did you go with? Is it chapter based? Did you break it down in any way?
So it is chapter based, and I kind of broke it down to the ceramics elements, like I was talking about, like the seasons. So
Okay.
we start with clay, and so I just break it down. I say you don't have to know anything about ceramics to understand this book or to read this book because I break everything down. So we start with the very basic forms of clay, where it comes from, how it works. We go into tools, what tools look like, how they work, going into how do you use clay, what are the different stages of drying clay, firing it, what is glaze, what is it made up of. And so as we're walking through each of those chapters, there are verses in the Bible that relate to those situations or relate to our relationship with God, similarly to how potters relate with the clay. And so I kind of parallel those two in that relationship as the book goes along.
Nice. So
Thanks.
it has like a nice cohesive flow. And the cool thing is you get to learn in the process and also be able to have something to connect with. It's it's really nice because when you have those moments like, oh, that there isn't anything that exists. So I'm gonna make one. I'm
Mm,
gonna, I'm gonna do something about it. I mean, you need to there's a quote by Walt Disney that I kind of live by. I have it tattooed on my arm. It's kind of fun to do the impossible.
yeah. Well, it's only impossible if you think it's impossible, right?
Exactly.
I don't
Right.
remember who said that, but that's not original. I got that from somewhere.
Of course. But it's just realizing that, impossible obstacles are impossible if you want them to. Try to figure out the solution and how to make them work. And I think sometimes if you can't, circling back, sometimes we're just not in the right headspace or just like not the right moment.
Yeah, or like in my case, I didn't have the experience, and I really didn't. Like looking back at that first manuscript, I'm like, "Whew, what did I think? Like who was gonna read this? No wonder why it didn't go anywhere." And it's amazing just in like 3 years how much I learned. And it's really like you said, like changing environments can make a huge difference. So if you're feeling stuck and it's the right time and you have the ability to change pace, change scene, change jobs, it can really just really open up your life to like new experiences, new friends, learning different things, different perspective for sure.
Yeah, I had I moved. I'm originally from New York. If you can't tell by my accent, uh, I grew up in New York. I lived there for about 18 years. I traveled around, and I left and I moved down here to Florida.
Hmm.
And it was probably one of the best decisions I made. I love my home state, but right now it's trash, and it's trash in regards to like the lack of freedom and self-expression. Like I am able to feel more freely as an artist and creatively with others than I did back there. And yeah, people are like, oh, moving to another place. Sometimes you gotta do it.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah, no, I agree. I love my hometown and I grew up in upstate South Carolina. And so I it was a great experience. I love my hometown. I have a lot of art buyers there, a lot of supporters, and I love it. But I didn't have enough art buying support to make it successfully there, I guess is a good way to put it. And so moving to Asheville, North Carolina, there's a whole lot more ceramic influence that I'm able to get ceramic support I need and get information and there's more festivals so I can do more sales and there is just a bigger buying crowd because it's a tourist destination and so I can really tell there's a bigger support of the arts in the area and you're right that does make a huge difference and it's not to say I don't do shows and in upstate South Carolina and I still have stuff in galleries there but sometimes if you need to make the move, that's what you need to do.
yeah, and it's just being able to have your own healthy environment. Being in a place that you feel restrictive or confined, it's not healthy.
Right.
It's kind of the opposite of what you're taught
Mm,
religiously. You're supposed to take care of yourself, not butcher yourself. You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah. Yeah, self-care. I mean, that's come out of the pandemic too. That's a big thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been a real big problem too. I mean, look at what look at what's going on. I don't have any words. Do we understand that isolating people for long periods has very damaging effects on people?
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I moved during the pandemic, which
Oh my god, do you move like at the beginning or at the end?
when did I move? Like 2021-ish. So like not in, not when it was terrible. But things were still scary. There was
I
still,
gotcha. Okay.
still masks, but no, definitely not during the lockdown or anything. But I just could not handle the retail environment anymore because people were so stressed. They were taking it out on retail folks
Oh
answering
no.
phones. And that is not a healthy environment either. And I understand. I understand people were stressed. Of course, everyone was scared. But again, just it's nice to share kindness and be kind to the people on the phone because they are real people.
They are real people. Oh, and it's it is so strange that we have human interaction on a phone. Like you call up people or you speak to people on the phone, and every single day it just feels like another nightmare ready to just hit you in the face. And I don't I don't think it's the pandemic to blame solely. I think it was just the build up and then the after and
Mm,
just the reality that we're in now. But I still believe that there needs to be awareness, because if there isn't, we're going to run into a situation we're not going to like.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, kindness goes a long way. And I think some of it is people don't really realize real people. I mean, AI's gotten so serious, you don't always know if you're talking to a real person or not on the phone. So I would give some people some grace for that. But also, when you're stressed, I understand you don't always handle it well.
No, I don't think anybody does.
No, so, I don't blame them for taking out their stress on people they can't see who can't retaliate, but, you know, I for me, I needed to focus on my own art and, take a step back from that, and so that's why I moved, and it was a great experience.
And I don't know. It sounds like it worked out. I mean, in the end of the day, if you're able to blossom and expand your creativity, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Question for you, for anybody out there, where can they find your work? If you have a social media or a website.
Sure. I'll send you to my website, and from there you can do all that good stuff, find my social
Ooh,
media,
okay.
shop, buy the book, sign up for my newsletter. But my website's just my name, morganmccarver.com.
Oh, nice.
Short and sweet. Yeah.
Perfect. And
Yeah.
everything's on there.
Everything's on there. Right now, it's set up so the first page you see is how to pre order God the Artist, the book. And
Okay.
from there, you can shop my Etsy. You can go on my About page and see my social media, see what galleries I'm in between the Carolinas and Tennessee, and sign up for my newsletter at the bottom of the screen. Just keep up with me from there.
Oh, nice. Well, it's really cool because now I get to learn, not only as ceramic artist, but you kind of had a ceramic journey.
I have. That's a great way to put it.
Pretty much.
Yep. And I feel like it's only just beginning too. Who
Oh,
knows?
yeah. I really, because this point from 10 years, you don't know where this is going to take you. You really don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, before I forget this, anyone that wants to find the podcast, we are on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. Morgan, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm gonna wrap this up.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having
Oh,
me.
it's my pleasure. All right, everybody. Bye.